Hi everyone, it's Tasha de Cruz here, and today I'm talking about stress and early motherhood and the way that it can affect our health, and as well as some strategies to help cope with it. So stress is governed by the hormone cortisol, and cortisol is a natural hormone that is released to give us an extra burst of energy. It's perfectly normal and common to have cortisol release. For example, it helps us get up first thing in the morning. It keeps us out of harm's way. It's what drives us to feed our baby when it cries, to look after ourselves. It becomes a problem when we experience really chronic stress. So, for example, say you have long-term poor sleep, if you're hungry because you haven't eaten much all day, if you haven't had a good recovery from childbirth, if you have poor nutrient status, for example, maybe you haven't been eating particularly well during pregnancy and you haven't spent the time sort of putting all those nutrients that were lost during pregnancy and childbirth back in, and maybe you just have everyday stress, such as the pressure mounting to deal with housework or money concerns or looking after babies, for example. Now, the effect of long-term chronic stress could be perhaps that you have difficulty losing weight after you've given birth. Now, obviously, I always say the first 6 months is not about losing weight, but say you really find that after those first 6 months that you're just holding on to fat from that you gained during pregnancy. You feel that you're not really able to cope, you're not finding the joy that everyone promises you in parenting. Maybe you're feeling really, really drained, but you can't sleep when you actually do lie down. Now, over time, these sort of constant chronic levels of cortisol and stress can, over time, just cause our body to stop producing cortisol, to stop dealing with the stress, because it becomes an everyday occurrence. It becomes so used to it that it's like, well, maybe we don't need this amount of cortisol. And over time, over a long period of time, we get burnout, or some people call it adrenal fatigue. Now, in early motherhood, stress is particularly important to try and manage well. And the reason for this is the hormone oxytocin, which is also known as the love hormone or the cuddle hormone, is what governs contractions during labour. So it's oxytocin that ensures or enables contractions to happen, and it also is a really important hormone in breastfeeding. But oxytocin is very, very sensitive to cortisol. So some of you may, if you've already given birth, may have experienced, perhaps you were quite, progressing really well in your labour. You were called your midwife. You've been told, yes, you're in active labour. It's time to come in to the delivery suite. You get there. They check you and they say, oh, actually, you're not really that dilated, which must be so frustrating. Now, this can actually happen because perhaps you've been at home, a really quiet, calm, cozy environment. Your body feels relaxed, in the familiar, surrounded by loved people, loved ones. It releases this oxytocin. There's no stress there. There's nothing to block that oxytocin release. But then when you get in the car, you're going to hospital, you're going to your birth centre, you're going into an unfamiliar building, perhaps with bright lights, meeting unfamiliar people, and that is a stressful situation. You might not realise it, but your body perceives that as unfamiliar, potentially unsafe environment. And so you start releasing your cortisol, and that could block that oxytocin. So that's a really sort of obvious way that in pregnancy stress can really affect the way oxytocin is released. Now, traumatic births can obviously release cortisol and be very stressful, and that this can be a risk factor for postnatal depression, and as well as difficulty breastfeeding, and that kind of makes sense if you know that cortisol blocks the oxytocin production, which is an important hormone in breastfeeding. Now, oxytocin and prolactin, which is another important factor in breastfeeding, both improve maternal behavior and stress levels. So low levels of both of these hormones due to stress can be a risk factor for postnatal depression. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation there. Another factor in early motherhood is tiredness and fatigue. Now, these both raise cortisol levels again, and they can also cause cravings for sugar and carbs, which can cause sugar crashes and obviously the associated mood swings. And then you get into this really vicious cycle of being tired, being stressed, finding it difficult to mother, then finding it stressful again, causing anxiety, and then causing fatigue, and then you're in this really sort of never-ending cycle. Poor sleep is also associated with increased inflammation in the body, and that's really important because it means it diverts the immune system away from healing after giving birth, and towards sort of dealing with this inflammation due to poor sleep. And this then can cause stress, levels to rise again, lowered immunity, anxiety, and that sort of really real difficulty coping. Now, the third factor, or the third way that stress can really affect your health in early motherhood is actually your gut bacteria, which may be a bit surprising to some. But when you're feeling relaxed, when you're in a happy, safe place, your gut bacteria is kept in check, it's kept in balance. They're not sort of one favouring one colony over another. But when you're in a stressful situation, when you're having these sort of constant chronic levels of stress, your gut bacteria starts displaying quite erratic behaviour, and they can't keep each other in check, which means you might have an imbalance of one over another, or potentially might not be able to keep the so-called bad bacteria in check. And an imbalance in gut bacteria has a huge knock-on effect on your immunity, obviously on your gut health, your brain health, hormone health, all of these, which are really common concerns anyway in early motherhood. So if you are wondering whether your stress is affecting your gut health, there's a little checklist to run through. So how frequently are you moving your bowels? Do you have constipation or diarrhea? Do you have loss of appetite or maybe erratic hunger? Stomach cramps? Are you experiencing indigestion or reflux? Now, these could all be clues that something's not quite right in your digestive system. So those are three ways that stress can really affect your health and wreck your ability to cope as a mother, really, and potentially have quite wide-ranging long-term knock-on effects. So how do you cope? How do you manage the stress? Now, the assumption is that being a mother is stressful, right? It is stressful. What can you do? It's inevitable. Well, is it? I don't think so. Yes, being a mother is difficult, and you face really scary scenarios often, difficult decisions. You might often feel quite anxious, but it's whether you face that stress, whether you get to that level of stress that has that effect on your health, depends on how your body's resilience is and how well it is able to cope. So you want to build good resilience, and look after yourself in such a way that you can have a better ability to cope. So I've come up with 8 strategies to help with that. Now, the first one is to eat regularly. Now, it's so common for new mums to forget to eat, or maybe to grab something at breakfast time, maybe someone's leftovers, and then forget to eat for the rest of the day. And then linked to that, number 2 is eat the right stuff, eat quality food, make sure that it's food that keeps you fueled, doesn't make you hungry, a couple of hours later, keeps you going. Third is to breathe. Now, this is really obvious, we breathe all the time, right? But what I mean by that is pause, 5 breaths, and go again. Because so often we breathe without thinking, and we have these really shallow breaths. And if we stop and just listen, allow ourselves to pay attention to our breath without forcing it, you will naturally breathe deeper, and this has an immediate effect on your stress levels to bring it down. And rather than sort of say, right, I'm going to do 5 breaths first thing in the morning, my suggestion is to pepper it through your day. So think about how can I add it throughout the day rather than just once. My 4th one is ask for help. It's so difficult as a new mum, maybe being British as well doesn't help. but we're so bad at asking for help. But people want to help, they just don't really know how. So think about making a list of things people can help you with as a new mum. Number 5, say no. Now, women are so guilty of taking on everyone else's problems, or saying yes to things that are just kind of adding an extra burden. Now, as a new mum, this could be saying no to having too many visitors. Now, obviously, in this current climate of lockdown, you're not going to get any visitors anyway. But even, saying no to a video call if you're not feeling up to it, or I don't know, saying no to that laundry basket that is calling your name. You're allowed to say that. Say it out loud. Laugh. Now, again, laughter is a really has a really wonderful effect on the body. It obviously it makes you feel lighter, it makes you feel happier. Find the joy in your children, whether however old they are, whether they're babies or toddlers. They are hilarious. They are funny. Now, rather than just kind of smile and move on, allow yourself to do a big belly laugh. Do whatever you can to kind of get that huge laughter out. My 7th one is move. And I don't mean sort of, start doing HIIT or any sort of full-on movement, but just walk. Go out for a walk when you're allowed to, for once a day for your exercise, or walk around the garden if you have one. Just move as much as you can in a gentle, relaxed way. And then the 8th one, which is the hardest one, I think, for new mums, but take time for yourself. Practice self-love, whatever that means for you. I've got a whole series of blogs coming up about how to take time for yourself and how to practice self-love. So I won't go into that too much right now, but just bear in mind that this is one of the most difficult things to do as a new mum, but the most important one to do. So the reason why I'm talking about this is because I implore you to stop that cycle now of stress, poor health and so on, because it might feel very acute now, but over time, if you're not addressing it, if you don't look at it, it is going to become chronic, with all those knock-on health effects that I talked about earlier. I want you to have a future full of abundant energy, so that you can find that joy and really flourish as a mother. So if you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss another video. If you'd like to know more about how I can help you, how nutrition can help find that energy again, get in touch and we can have a free discovery call. And I hope this was useful. Let me know in the comments what you think, how stress has affected you, how you manage stress, your strategies for coping, and whether you've noticed any knock-on effects on your health if you're feeling stressed, and vice versa. Take care. Bye.